There is a certain kind of invisibility reserved for those who serve. They become part of the architecture, a pair of hands that delivers and clears, a voice that recites specials without tone. Anna knew this invisibility intimately. It was a cloak she wore with her starched white dress and slate-gray apron, a shield against the casual cruelties of the world she now inhabited. Tonight, the air in Aria, a restaurant so exclusive it felt less like a place to eat and more like a vault for the wealthy, was thick with the scent of truffle oil and quiet money. Anna moved through it, a ghost with a water pitcher, her feet throbbing in rhythm with the muted jazz trio in the corner. Her body, soft and generous in a world that prized sharpness, ached with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle. It was the weight of her father's illness, the crushing pressure of medical bills that grew like weeds in the dark. Each refilled glass, each cleared plate, was a coin dropped into a bottomless well. And then they arrived. The room seemed to tilt on its axis, the low hum of conversation dipping as if in deference. He was a man carved from shadow and granite, his suit a slash of perfect black against the cream and gold decor. This was Marco Bellini, a name spoken in whispers, a man whose power was an unspoken current in the city's underbelly. With him were two women, one, a blonde with eyes the color of cold diamonds and a smile that didn't reach them, and the other, an elderly woman whose face was a beautiful, intricate map of a long life, her posture as straight and unyielding as a queen's. Anna felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in her stomach. Tables like this were minefields. The woman with the diamond eyes, Victoria Davenport, made her disdain known from the moment she sat. She waved a dismissive hand at the water Anna poured, her lip curling slightly as she took in Anna's form. "Be careful with that," she murmured, just loud enough for Anna to hear. "We wouldn't want a tidal wave." Marco said nothing, his gaze distant, as if he were observing a play in which he had no part. The elderly woman, his grandmother Isabella, simply watched, her dark eyes missing nothing. The meal was a sequence of small tortures. Victoria found fault with everything: the temperature of the soup, the placement of her fork, the very air Anna breathed. She treated Anna not as a person, but as a malfunctioning appliance. Each complaint was a small, sharp jab designed to remind Anna of her place. "Could you possibly move a little faster?" Victoria sighed dramatically as Anna cleared the appetizer plates. "Some of us have engagements to keep." Anna kept her face a placid mask, her voice even. "Of course, madam." Inside, she was a roiling sea of frustration and exhaustion. She thought of her father, his frail hand in hers that afternoon, and she swallowed her pride. She needed this job. The breaking point came with the red wine. As Anna leaned in to refill Marco's glass, Victoria shifted her chair abruptly, a calculated, venomous little movement. The heavy bottle tipped, and a splash of dark crimson bloomed across the pristine white of Anna's dress, right over her stomach. A collective gasp went through the nearby tables. Victoria looked up, her expression one of theatrical horror. "Oh, my goodness. You are clumsy, aren't you?" Mr. Dubois, the restaurant manager, materialized instantly, his face a mask of panicked apology aimed squarely at Victoria. "Miss Davenport, I am so dreadfully sorry. This is unacceptable." He turned on Anna, his voice a low hiss. "You will be paying for the dry cleaning and get yourself cleaned up." Now Marco remained silent, a statue of indifference. But his grandmother, Isabella, finally moved. She placed a frail but firm hand on Anna's arm, stopping her retreat. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, were fixed on Anna's face, searching for something beyond the humiliation. The old woman's touch was surprisingly strong, anchoring Anna in place. The world narrowed to the pressure of those fingers on her arm and the intense, searching gaze of the matriarch. Isabella's voice, when it came, was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Wait." Mr. Dubois froze, his mouth half open. Victoria's triumphant smirk faltered. As Isabella tried to rise slightly to get a better look at the stain, a silver locket on a delicate chain slipped from the collar of her dress and fell to the plush carpet with a soft thud. Before anyone else could react, Anna bent down, her movements fluid despite her fatigue. She picked up the locket, its metal cool against her palm. It was old, the silver worn to a soft gleam, intricately chased with tiny, swirling leaves. As she went to hand it back, her thumb brushed against the clasp.
She paused.
The mechanism was a miniature work of art, a tiny, interlocking puzzle of silver. Her breath caught. Without thinking, letting years of buried passion surface, she spoke. The words that came out were not English. They flowed in a soft, lyrical stream of perfect, Florentine Italian, a language she hadn't spoken to anyone but her father in years. "The clasp is the work of Giulio Romano," she said, her voice gentle, reverent. "He designed these for the Gonzaga court. It is a masterpiece." The silence at the table was no longer just quiet. It was a vacuum. Mr. Dubois stared, utterly bewildered. Victoria's face was a storm of fury and confusion. And Marco Bellini, Marco, the man of stone, leaned forward. His impassive mask had shattered, replaced by an expression of raw, undisguised shock. His eyes, dark and unreadable moments before, were now locked on Anna, blazing with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But it was Isabella's reaction that mattered most. The old woman's eyes, which had been sharp and assessing, softened with a sudden, brilliant light of recognition and delight. A genuine, beautiful smile spread across her face. She took the locket from Anna's hand and then, astonishingly, clasped Anna's hand in both of her own. Isabella ignored her grandson's shock and Victoria's sputtering indignation. She held Anna's hand, her thumb tracing patterns over Anna's knuckles. "Sit," she commanded, not asked. She gestured to the empty chair beside her, a seat at a table that cost more per person than Anna earned in a week. Mr. Dubois looked as though he might faint. "But, Signora Bellini," he stammered. "She is staff." Isabella cut him off with a look so sharp it could have sliced bread. "She is my guest." Anna, bewildered, found herself sinking into the plush velvet of the chair. She was acutely aware of the wine stain on her dress, of her worn-out shoes, of the vast social chasm between herself and these people. Victoria glared, her face pinched with fury. "No, really. This is inappropriate. She's a waitress. She is a woman with knowledge," Isabella corrected, her voice firm. She turned her full attention back to Anna. "Tell me, how do you know of Romano?" All the years of poring over books in dusty libraries, of dreaming of a life surrounded by beauty before reality intervened, came rushing back. "I studied art history," Anna explained, her voice gaining a quiet confidence. "Renaissance metalwork was my specialization. I was working on my master's thesis before I had to stop." She didn't elaborate on the reason, on the sterile smell of hospitals that had replaced the scent of old canvas and oil paint. She didn't need to. The story was there in the shadows under her eyes. Marco watched her, his silence now different. It was no longer aloofness, it was focus. He was seeing her for the first time, not as a fixture of the restaurant, but as a person with a hidden, brilliant interior. He saw the passion in her eyes as she spoke of history, the dignity she had maintained under Victoria's assault. When the check came, he handled it without a word. But as they prepared to leave, he paused beside Anna's chair. He pressed a folded bill into her hand. It felt thick, substantial, and tucked a crisp business card with it. His fingers brushed hers, sending a jolt of warmth through her. "My grandmother was very impressed," he said, his voice a low rumble meant only for her. "And so was I. Call me if you ever need anything." Then he was gone, leaving Anna with a racing heart, a wine-stained dress, and the bewildering sense that the ground beneath her feet had fundamentally, irrevocably shifted. The next few days were a blur of worried hospital visits and exhausting shifts. The encounter at Aria felt like a strange, vivid dream. Anna tucked Marco's card into the cracked frame of a photo of her and her father, a talisman from another world. She tried to forget it, to focus on the grim reality of her father's declining health. His doctors were talking about a new experimental treatment, one that offered a sliver of hope but came with a price tag that was astronomical. The hope was a cruel, flickering candle in the face of a financial hurricane. Then the attack came. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, bureaucratic assassination. A call from a kind, apologetic nurse at the hospital. "Anna, I'm so sorry," the nurse Mary began, her voice full of genuine regret. "There's been a review of your father's insurance coverage. Some anonymous complaint was filed about his eligibility. They've put a hold on his treatments pending a full investigation." Anna's blood ran cold. "A hold? But he can't wait," the doctors said. "I know," Mary whispered. "We're fighting it, but these things, they can take weeks." The complaint was filed with a state board, citing concerns about pre-existing condition disclosures. "It's targeted, Anna. I've never seen anything like it." Weeks. Her father didn't have weeks. It was a death sentence delivered on letterhead. And she knew, with a sickening certainty that settled like lead in her gut, who was behind it.
Victoria Davenport.
It was a move of breathtaking cruelty, an attack not on Anna herself, but on the one person she loved most in the world. Victoria couldn't get her fired. Isabella's favor had made her untouchable at the restaurant for now, so she had dug into Anna's life and found the most vulnerable point, twisting the knife with precision. Despair washed over Anna, so total and consuming it was hard to breathe. This was a fight she couldn't win. She was a waitress against a woman with infinite resources and zero morality. She sat on her small, worn sofa, the eviction notice she'd received last week on the table beside a stack of medical bills, and felt the walls closing in. The world of art and history had never felt so far away. This was her life, a desperate scramble for survival, and she was losing. For a full hour, Anna let the despair consume her. She curled into a ball on the sofa, the thin fabric of the cushions soaking up her silent tears. It was a calculated, soulless cruelty. Victoria hadn't just attacked her, she had targeted the fragile thread of hope keeping her father alive. It was a message. People like you don't get to have hope. People like you don't get to inconvenience me and get away with it. But then, something shifted inside her. The despair began to burn, transforming into a hard, cold rage. She would not let her father die because of some petty socialite's bruised ego. She would not let Victoria win. Her eyes landed on the photograph on her cluttered bookshelf, and behind it, the corner of Marco Bellini's business card. "Call me if you ever need anything," the words echoed in her mind. He was part of that world, a world of power and influence she couldn't comprehend. Asking for his help felt like a surrender, an admission of her own powerlessness. But this wasn't about her pride anymore. It was about her father's life. With trembling hands, she pulled out the card. It was heavy, expensive cardstock, his name embossed in simple, elegant font. She dialed the number before she could lose her nerve. He answered on the second ring, his voice the same low rumble she remembered. "Bellini, Mr. Bellini, this is Anna. The waitress from Aria," she said, her voice tight but steady. She had rehearsed this. She would not sound like a victim.
She would not beg.
"I apologize for calling you, but you said to call if I needed anything. I don't want money. I need advice. I need to know if you can recommend a patient advocacy group or a lawyer who works pro bono. My father's insurance has been suspended, and I believe it was done maliciously." She laid out the facts calmly, clinically, stripping the story of its emotional devastation and presenting it as a problem to be solved. There was a long silence on the other end of a line. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he was just being polite. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Who is his doctor and what hospital?" She told him. "I will handle it," he said. It wasn't a promise to help. It was a statement of fact. "Do not worry about this again. I will call you back." The line went dead. Anna stared at her phone, a wild, terrifying hope looming in her chest. She had no idea what she had just set in motion, but she knew she was no longer fighting alone. Less than an hour later, Mary, the nurse, called back, her voice breathless with disbelief. "Anna, I don't know what you did or who you know, but it's fixed. The hold is lifted." The state board called the hospital administrator directly. They said the complaint was filed in grievous error and has been expunged. They offered a formal apology. "Your father's treatment is back on schedule for tomorrow morning. Relief washed over Anna so powerfully her knees went weak. It was a miracle. A dark, terrifying, efficient miracle. An hour after that, there was a knock on her apartment door. Her heart leaped into her throat. She opened it to find Marco Bellini standing in the dimly lit hallway of her building. He was impossibly out of place, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the peeling paint and worn linoleum. He looked bigger here, more formidable. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. She stepped back, numbly allowing him into her tiny, cluttered living space. His eyes swept over the room, taking in the stacks of art books piled on the floor, the single, faded armchair, the photograph of her and her smiling father. His gaze wasn't judgmental, it was assessing. He was piecing together the parts of her life she kept hidden. "It's done," he said simply, confirming what she already knew. "It will not happen again." "You have my word." "How?" she whispered, finding her voice. "What did you do?" A flicker of something cold and hard passed through his eyes. "I made it clear that your family is under my protection. It is an association Victoria will not risk challenging again." The implication hung in the air between them. Protection. It was a word that meant safety, but coming from him, it also tasted of danger. He took a step closer, his presence filling the small room. He looked at the art books, then back at her. "You stopped your studies for him, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. "He's all I have," she said quietly. He nodded, a deep understanding in his eyes. He saw her sacrifice, her fierce loyalty. In that moment, the power imbalance between them seemed to fade, replaced by a thread of connection. He saw her not as a waitress, not as a charity case, but as a woman of substance and strength. "Your talent is wasted here," he said, his gaze intense. "A mind like yours should not be clearing plates. We're going to fix that, too." Victoria Davenport was not accustomed to being thwarted. When she learned that the hold on the insurance had been mysteriously and instantly lifted, her fury was a venomous thing. She knew Marco was behind it. He had chosen the fat waitress over her. The humiliation was intolerable. Her plans had to escalate. It was no longer about punishing a clumsy server. It was about destroying her, and in doing so, reclaiming her power over Marco. Her opportunity came in the form of the annual Bellini Foundation Charity Gala, a lavish affair hosted at Aria to raise funds for the city's art museum. The centerpiece of the evening was always a donation from Isabella Bellini's private collection. This year, it was a small but priceless Renaissance masterpiece, a portrait by a Florentine master, rumored to be worth millions. Victoria saw her path with chilling clarity. She had connections in the less reputable corners of the art world. For a steep price, she commissioned a brilliant, near-perfect forgery of the painting. Her plan was diabolical in its simplicity. She would have the paintings swapped just before the gala. Then, during the unveiling, her own paid-for expert would expose it as a fake. In the ensuing chaos and scandal, she would plant the seed of suspicion. Who had the motive and the unique knowledge to orchestrate such a sophisticated crime? The waitress. The one who had recently impressed Isabella with her obscure art history knowledge. The one who was desperate for money for her sick father. It was a perfect, elegant trap. It would not only frame Anna for a major crime, destroying her reputation and her future, but it would also deeply embarrass the Bellini family, proving to Marco how foolish he was to place his trust in someone from the gutter. The night of the gala, the forgery was slipped into place, the real painting spirited away to a secure location, waiting to be recovered by Victoria's associates later. She moved through the glittering crowd, a vision in silk and diamonds, accepting compliments, her smile a predatory gleam. She watched Anna, who was working the event, moving through the tables with a tray of champagne flutes, oblivious to the web being woven around her. Victoria felt a thrill of anticipation. By the end of the night, everyone would see the waitress for what she was, a clever, calculating thief. And Marco would have no choice but to come crawling back to the world where he belonged, with her. The gala was in full swing, a symphony of clinking glasses, low laughter, and the scent of expensive perfume. Anna moved through the opulent chaos, her heart a steady, anxious strum. Marco had arranged for her to work the event, but had also insisted she meet the museum's curator. It felt like a test and an opportunity all at once. She saw Victoria gliding through the room, her smile as sharp as broken glass, and a chill went down her spine. The moment of the unveiling arrived. A hush fell over the crowd as Marco and his grandmother took the stage beside a velvet-draped easel. Isabella spoke briefly about the painting's history, her love for the artist. Then, with a flourish, Marco pulled away the velvet cloth. The portrait was revealed, a woman with an enigmatic smile, bathed in the soft light of another century. It was beautiful, but to Anna, something was immediately, jarringly wrong. The craquelure in the varnish was too uniform. The pigment in the blue of the subject's robe was a shade too vibrant, more Prussian blue than the lapis lazuli the artist would have used. Before she could process her unease, a man in a tailored suit stepped forward, introduced as a renowned art appraiser. He examined the painting for a dramatic moment before turning to the stunned crowd. "I regret to inform you," he announced, his voice ringing with false authority, "that this painting is a forgery. A very good one, but a fake nonetheless." A wave of shocked murmurs swept through the room. Isabella Bellini's face went pale. Marco's expression hardened into granite. Victoria stepped forward, her face a perfect mask of concern. "This is a tragedy," she exclaimed. "How could this have happened?" The painting was secure, then she turned, her eyes finding Anna in the crowd. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger.
Wait.
Her. The waitress. Anna, you told me yourself how much she knew about art. How she was desperate for money for her father. She was the only new person who got close to your family. The accusation hung in the air, sickening and plausible. All eyes turned to Anna. She was trapped in the spotlight, the weight of 100 suspicious stares pressing down on her. Mr. Dubois looked at her with pure horror. It was happening. Victoria's perfect trap was snapping shut. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Anna felt the blood drain from her face as the collective suspicion of the room bore down on her. She was the outsider, the charity case, the perfect scapegoat. Victoria's smile was a thin, triumphant slash of red. But then Marco moved. He didn't look at Victoria. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Anna, and in his eyes, she saw not a flicker of doubt, only cold, controlled fury. He stepped to the microphone. "An interesting theory," he said, his voice dangerously calm, echoing through the silent ballroom. "A theory based on prejudice and speculation. Fortunately, I prefer to deal in facts." He gestured to a large screen behind the stage. "As head of security for all Bellini family assets, I take certain precautions." The screen flickered to life. It showed a grainy, time-stamped security feed of a service corridor behind the ballroom. The footage clearly showed the so-called appraiser meeting with a nervous-looking man who handed him a briefcase. Then, it cut to another angle. The same man using a forged keycard to enter the secure room where the painting was stored, swapping it with the one from the briefcase. Victoria's face went white. The appraiser began to sweat, backing away towards the exit. "And as for Miss Davenport's assertion that Anna is a thief," Marco continued, his voice dropping to an icy growl, "I think we should let Anna herself address the matter of her expertise." He turned and extended a hand to her.
Anna.
"Please." A path cleared for her as she walked to the stage, her legs unsteady, but her resolve hardening with every step. She felt Marco's hand, warm and firm, as he helped her up. She stood before the microphone, facing the forgery, her mind suddenly sharp and clear. All the years of study, all the passion she had buried, rose to the surface. She began to speak. Her voice, quiet at first, grew in strength and confidence. "This is not a painting by Francesco del Casa," she began. "The artist used a poplar wood panel, prepared with a gesso of gypsum and animal glue. This panel's grain is too straight, it's modern oak. He ground his own pigments. The blue in the Madonna's robe should be from lapis lazuli, which gives it a crystalline, almost translucent depth. This is Prussian blue, a pigment not invented until the 18th century," she went on, her words painting a picture more vivid than the forgery itself. deconstructing the painting layer by layer. The brushwork, the use of shadow, the symbolic meaning of a flower in the corner that the forger had rendered incorrectly. She spoke not just as a scholar, but as someone who loved the art, who understood the soul of the artist. The room was utterly captivated. She had transformed from the accused into the ultimate authority. When she finished, a stunned silence held for a moment, and then the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Marco looked at her, his eyes shining with a pride and admiration so profound it took her breath away. From the front row, Isabella Bellini rose to her feet, leading the standing ovation, her face beaming. The trap had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly, showcasing the very brilliance it was meant to destroy. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Victoria. The public humiliation was absolute. Faced with incontrovertible video evidence and the testimony of a terrified appraiser who confessed everything, her world crumbled. The Davenports, a family that prized reputation above all else, cut her off completely to distance themselves from the scandal of attempting to defraud and frame an associate of the Bellini family. She vanished from the social scene, a ghost haunted by her own malice. Mr. Dubois was summarily fired from Aria, his sycophantic career ending the moment he failed to defend an innocent employee under the Bellini's protection. The day after the gala, Anna was summoned to Isabella's magnificent home. She sat not as a servant, but as an honored guest in a sun-drenched library filled with the scent of old books and lemon polish. Isabella sat opposite her, a warm smile on her face. "What you did last night was more than clever, my dear," the matriarch said, her voice full of warmth. "It was an act of profound integrity. You defended not just yourself, but the honor of the art itself." She slid a heavy parchment envelope across the polished mahogany table. "The Bellini Foundation is funding a new scholarship for promising art historians. You are its first recipient. A full ride to complete your master's and your PhD if you choose, at the University of Florence. All expenses paid. We have also arranged for the finest medical care for your father, for as long as he needs it." Anna stared at the envelope, tears blurring her vision. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, a life she thought was lost to her forever. "And when you are finished with your studies," Isabella added, her eyes twinkling, "I will need a curator for my private collection. The position is yours." Later that evening, Anna found Marco on the restaurant's rooftop terrace, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. The air was cool and clean. He stood watching the sky, but turned as she approached. "I came to thank you," she said softly. "You gave me back my future." "You earned your future, Anna," he corrected, his voice a low, intimate murmur. He stepped closer, the space between them crackling with unspoken energy. "I was just the man lucky enough to see who you were all along." He looked at her, his gaze tracing the soft curves of her face, his expression open and vulnerable for the first time. "I have lived my life surrounded by beautiful, empty things. Performers. Liars. People who want something from me. And then I saw you. You stood up to humiliation with dignity. You spoke a language of beauty and history that came from your soul. You fought for your father with a courage I have rarely seen." He gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Do you remember what I thought, that first night at the table, when I heard you speak to my grandmother with such passion?" Anna shook her head, her breath catching in her throat. "I thought, she just stole my heart." And then he lowered his head and kissed her, a kiss that was not about power or possession, but about recognition, about two solitary souls finally, blessedly, finding their home in one another.